All right, so we're diving deep on Brandon Staley today. We're trying to figure out if this guy's really a defensive genius, like some people say, or if he's maybe a bit overhyped.
Yeah.
And I got to say, I'm with you on this one. We've got articles, we've got even a whole YouTube deep dive on him.
Right.
It seems like Staley is definitely someone who gets people talking.
He does. He does.
And sometimes, and not always for the best reasons, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at what we've got here, and it's interesting because you see this real tension in the sources.
Uh-huh.
On the one hand, you've got people praising his defensive schemes, saying he's a mastermind.
Yeah.
But then there's no getting around it. He's had some pretty high-profile losses, too.
Yeah, you can't just ignore those. And it's not like he took the typical path to becoming a coach either, right?
Right.
Like starting out as a college quarterback.
Yeah.
Then switching over to coaching. And then on top of all that, he has to battle cancer.
Battling cancer.
That's a whole other level of resilience right there. I mean, do you think that kind of experience shapes a coach? Like in terms of their leadership and strategy and all that?
It's tough to say for sure, I think, but you can definitely imagine that having to face that kind of adversity
Yeah.
would force anyone to become more adaptable,
Right.
to think outside the box a little bit more. And it does seem like that's reflected in how Staley coaches,
Yeah.
especially back with the Rams.
Right, with the Rams. I mean, that 2020 Rams defense was the #1 defense in the entire NFL.
Top of the league?
Top of the league. For those of us out there who maybe don't live and breathe football,
Sure.
what makes a defense truly elite? What were they doing that was so special?
It goes beyond just stopping the other team from scoring points. It's
Right.
about controlling the entire flow of the game. That Rams defense was amazing at creating turnovers,
Right.
forcing the other team into terrible field position,
Yeah.
and basically just throwing their whole offensive rhythm completely off. They were aggressive, unpredictable, and it just kept her opponents constantly off balance.
Okay, I see. That makes sense. But even with a player like Aaron Donald on the field, I mean, the guy's a powerhouse, right?
Oh, yeah,
You still need a coach who can actually use that talent effectively.
for sure.
So how much of the Rams' success do you think was really Staley's strategy versus just having Donald on the roster?
Right.
Because the sources seem a bit split on that.
Yeah, that's the classic question, isn't it? System versus talent.
Yeah,
Honestly, it's almost impossible to separate them completely.
right.
I think what we can say for sure is that Staley's schemes really took advantage of Donald's strengths.
Okay,
It wasn't just rushing the pastors every play.
right.
Staley had him moving all over the place, creating chaos, and that opened up so many opportunities for the other players to shine.
I see, I see.
So, yeah, Donald was a huge factor for sure.
Oh, yeah,
But I think Staley deserves credit for building a system that amplified his impact.
I could see that. So then you have the Chargers era,
Right.
which honestly felt like a total roller coaster ride.
Yeah, up and down for sure.
Playoffs 1 minute, and then that brutal 63-21 loss to the Raiders the next.
Oof, yeah, that one was tough to watch.
How do we even begin to weigh those two extremes when we're evaluating Staley's coaching?
Well, I think getting to the playoffs was huge for the Chargers.
Yeah.
A real sign of improvement after years of them struggling.
Definitely.
But a loss like that to the Raiders, that sticks with people. You know, it raises questions about his ability to make the right calls under pressure.
Right.
And that's where that infamous timeout comes in, I think.
Yes, the infamous timeout. That seems to be the moment everyone keeps coming back to. So for those of us who weren't at that game, break it down for us.
Okay, so,
What happened? Why was that timeout so controversial?
all right, so picture this. It's late in the game.
Okay.
Raiders have the ball. It's 4th down.
All right, high stakes.
High stakes. And Staley calls a timeout right then.
Ooh.
Which basically gave the Raiders offense a chance to regroup, catch their breath, and rethink their play call.
Oh, so he basically helped them out?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, they ended up converting on that 4th down and scoring a touchdown, and a lot of people believe that completely shifted the momentum of the game in the Raiders' favor.
Wow.
It was a big gamble, and it backfired big time.
Wow, so a risky move that blew up in his face and maybe even cost them the game. Now he's the assistant head coach for the 49ers. Do you see that as a demotion or more like a chance to rebuild his career under a coach like Kyle Shanahan?
It's tough to know what his long-term goals are, really, but working with Shanahan, who's a brilliant offensive mind,
Yeah.
that could be a really strategic move for him.
Yeah.
It gives Staley a chance to learn some new things, maybe refine his approach and prove that he can be successful again.
Right.
It could be a stepping stone back to a head coaching job down the road.
That makes sense. All right, so after going through all this, what's your final verdict on Staley? Defensive mastermind, gambler, something in between?
I think it's fair to say he's a really smart defensive coach. The stats and the way his players have performed back that up.
Mhm.
But there are also those questionable decisions moments where his risk-taking didn't pay off.
Right.
So at the end of the day, it's up to each team to decide if they're willing to bet on his potential, knowing that there's some risk involved.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. You've definitely given us a lot more to consider when it comes to Brandon Staley. And for those of you listening, imagine you're an NFL owner with a head coaching position to fill. After taking this deep dive into Staley's career, would you take a chance on him? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you next time.